Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of A Happy Moment. My name is Dan, and I'm glad to have you with me today. I do have a very special guest with me today. He is author Evan Heuker. Evan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you with us today. Uh, Evan is the author of the Warriors Legacy Trilogy. And Evan, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you first got started in writing?
Okay, well, yeah. Uh, I originally started writing the book series itself started as a sixth grade homework assignment, so that was actually back in 2001. We were learning genres, and every time we went from one genre to the another, a teacher had us write a little short story, so it would show that we understood what each genre was, and that's when I found out that I actually really liked the sci-fi fantasy genre. And I just kind of kept what I had, which was just like a little 5 page or something like that. I remember that the books itself had didn't really have like a beginning or an end. It just kind of had characters in a situation. And then in eighth grade, it was pretty much the exact same assignment. So I brought it back and then I started it from the beginning. So the books themselves, like I said, they're sci-fi fantasy. It's a trilogy, and it's about a group of kids. They get mixed up in a war that's been going on out in the universe for a long time, and they end up finding necklaces that belong to warriors from long ago. And they discover that with the necklaces, they can become those warriors and use the abilities they had. So you got one that commands dragons, and there's a shapeshifter and a telekinetic, and there's a few others. So with these powers, it becomes their responsibility to put an end to the war.
Now, are they actually morphing into these other personas, or are they just
Yes. Yep. They
like
do. They
okay,
change
they
into
are
them. Yep.
okay? And would you like to tell us a little bit about your one of your protagonists? So you got Esmer there. Is the name? If I'm pronouncing that correctly?
Yep. Esmer. So Esmer's the main character. It starts with him, and then he kind of meets all these other people as he goes along. He's just kind of like your regular farm boy kid. You know, his folks have been doing just agricultural stuff, and he just gets thrown into the situation. And I guess it's not spoilers. It happens pretty much at the beginning of the book. It's one of those basic kind of superhero things. You know, the parents die, so the kid kind of has to do his thing. And his warrior is Dragon, so he's the one that he commands all dragons. He can become a dragon, and I based him mostly off of myself because when I first started writing as a kid, you know, everybody wants to be their own superhero or just the hero of their story. So he was pretty much based on me growing up, but he kind of changed over the years as I wrote it. So it's still got me in there, but he's become his own kind of thing.
Okay. Now you mentioned dragons. How about from the sci-fi side of things? Do you have like alien races or advanced technology here?
So the story has a combination of both. I'm working on like the bigger lore behind all of it, but it has the mythological creatures, you know, the dragons, wizards, you know, all that. But I have them traverse from planet to planet. So there are alien races that I kind of throw in there, but it keeps, you know, your elves, your dwarves. But I also put in my own kind of characters. And of course, I had to give them really weird names. So there's like the Watamians or the Gorains and kind of stuff like that.
How did you come up with the different names?
A lot of the time, it's really weird. A lot of the time, I would just kind of like turn my head away from the keyboard, hit a key, and see the letter, and then come up with a name that started with that letter. So a lot of them were kind of just, let's see what this comes to, you know?
All right, very cool. I always have a difficult time coming up with names myself, but I've never tried that method before. Just kind of randomly hitting a key and seeing where it takes me. That's a good idea. I'll have to try that sometime.
Yeah.
uh, when did you publish the first book?
So the first book originally got published in 2009. So there's a bit of a rocky road with how this happened. So I was my first year of college, I just had it done and I was looking through different publishers and I found a self-publishing company and I did it through a company. I guess I can say their name because their name doesn't exist anymore. They changed their name, so I don't even know who they are anymore. They used to be called Author House. So I went through them and I did that with the original printings for the books 1, 2, and 3. And by the time I got to the third book, they weren't cooperative, they weren't communicating, uh, they raised their prices. They were basically ripping me off with a bunch of different things, so I left them. And then I went to a not a book fair, but it was a convention just for authors. And when I was there, I met somebody. I met a lot of people, but I talked to them about my struggles and how I just left my self-publishing company. And one of them was like, "Well, I can hook you up with who I'm working with and see where it goes from there." So now I'm published through BHC Press, who is right out of Michigan. And they went through and republished all my books and they separated it out. So it was just last year that the third book got its second printing. So it's the trilogy was redone, and this time I was able to get through an editor and I was able to get like an actual person to design the cover, so it has moved along a lot smoothly this time. And uh, hopefully we'll see, maybe I'll get through them again, or I might get picked up with somebody else, but I am working on other books, so we'll see how that goes.
Okay. Now, is does the trilogy have a definitive ending, or do you still plan on expanding on that with additional books?
It does have a definitive ending. I don't know what it is, but I always feel that a trilogy is the best. To me, it is anyway. A trilogy is the best way to go through and tell a story. Now, I'm not saying that other things can't do it. There are things that kind of go, it's a trilogy, and then after that they add more to it. Looking at you, Star Wars. But no, it is you know a a beginning and an end.
All right. No spin-off books for some of the characters.
I am working on spin-offs because, like I said, these basically kids find the powers of these warriors. So I'm going back and trying to start basically the origins of the original warriors and how they first came to be.
All right, that sounds cool. Uh, Now, is this who's your target audience for this? Is it YA or is it more adult oriented?
It's mostly YA because, like I said, when I first started writing it, I was on like when I first really like got into the writing, I was like 15. So I targeted it for myself. It's what I liked at the time, and it mostly fits that audience. An older audience would like it too, but yeah, it's very young adult. There's no bad language. There's no adult scenes or anything like that. There's some there's a lot of fighting and war and some death along the way. But what Disney movie doesn't have that?
Right. Now, when you're writing, what would you say is the most challenging part of the writing process for you?
Whew, challenging part. I would say the fact that I would add characters into it and I would forget about other characters, which the editor reminded me. They're like, "What happened to this character? We haven't seen him in like 70 some pages." And I was like, "Oh shoot. Yeah, that guy, he's there." So I had to go back and remind myself that, yeah, I have these characters I've already established and they should have more reoccurrence within the story. So,
How about what's the most fun part of writing for you?
most fun part, I can make anything up. So, it's I just like the enjoyment of doing it. There's a lot of, fantastical things that I can throw in there, and it's just the whole adventure that I set these characters on, and the reaching that the completion of it all is really satisfying.
What is the setting like? Is it like does a lot of it take place in space or is it more like on a planet?
Well, it goes from planet to planet, so you have ones that are I don't make them like one topographical feature per se, but when they do go to planets, you do have one that's a little bit more snow and ice, and there's one that's like an open plain area, and then you have one that's just, there's a big city area. So it's a variety. You could just imagine them traversing if they were on Earth. You could imagine them now they're in Africa, now they're in Antarctica, but instead of just one planet, they're going all over.
Right. All right, very cool. Now you mentioned some spin-off books for some of the characters. Uh, what else have you got in the works? Because I know a lot of authors usually have a dozen different projects they're juggling at a time.
I have a couple that I started years ago that I want to continue. One is just um, completely sci-fi. I guess I could say it's like my own take on like mutants, I suppose. I set that aside so I could finish this trilogy. And then the other story I'm working on was meant to be like a young adult kind of like love story, but I didn't really get into it. I might revisit it. It's still in my mind. Um, but other than that, right now I'm actually currently working on a comic, and that I'm hoping will have issued one finished sometime early next year. I'm hoping. There's no guarantee on that, but the comic itself will take place in the universe of my trilogy, but it'll be completely different characters. It'll have nothing to do with uh, anybody else in the trilogy.
Okay, awesome. So I can look forward to checking that comic out at next year's ThunderCon then, right?
I'm hoping. I'm hoping it'll be done by summer.
Very cool. Speaking of ThunderCon, that's where I connected with Evan over at ThunderCon in Alpena, Michigan. It's a fun little nerd convention. Evan, I believe there was a trivia question during ThunderCon, and one of the you were involved in one of the answers. It was
Yeah.
who was a part of every single ThunderCon, and you were one of them, right?
Yep. So I've been to every ThunderCon. There was one year where I didn't have a table, and that is when my books were in limbo between publishers. But I did go to attend. I said hi to everybody, and I made sure to stop by. But yeah, let's see. Man, I'm trying to remember how many years they've been doing ThunderCon, because they originally did it at the mall, and the mall has closed down since then. So now they have it in Art in the Loft, which is a great space. A lot of friendly people there. Man, what was the first
Yeah,
year?
definitely. I
Was the
know that was
first
another
year?
one of the trivia questions too. I think
Was it
is
because
it
I
tw-
remember
12 years now?
I, well, see, I remember doing it in 2014, but they had been doing it before then, because the first year was literally five guys sitting at two tables, and I was one of those five guys. So that was fun because it was me, John, Bob, and I can't remember the two other guys. I but I remember one. The one the name I can't remember. He made chainmail, and the other guy painted on Magic the Gathering cards. So he made it custom. But I
Okay,
don't remember his name though.
okay, and it's cool that a city as small as Alpena has its own convention. I think that's
Hmm.
really awesome.
Yeah.
Do you go to a lot of conventions?
I try to go to as many as I can. I always aim to get into Artist Alley. That doesn't always happen, but I've been doing Comic Con since 2009, so that's been 15 years now. And I've gone all over Michigan through many different Comic Cons. I've been outside of Michigan for one con because I got to go with somebody else and he let me share his space. But I'm hoping to start getting out of Michigan more. It's just a matter of time and money, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. And unfortunately, a lot of things come down to that.
Yeah.
um, what's your favorite part of going to cons? Is it like interacting with the people, or are there other
There
aspects of it you enjoy?
it's mostly because it's there's a con family. I get to see a lot of people and catch up with what's going on. I love going through Artist Alley. There are so many different talented people. For the most part, the cons that I attend range from like small to medium for the most part. I don't end up going to the larger ones because those are harder to get into. It it's just kind of, everybody's trying to get in now. Um, but yeah, the and each different con has like its own sort of group of people. Like the Alpina Con, for example. I know Steve that's been running it for years because he used to work with Jeff Miller, who runs the Cadillac Pop Con, and Steve ran a store for Jeff at the Alpena Mall because Jeff owns War Games North, which is all comics and magic cards and just a bunch of different collectibles. And he used to have a store at the Alpena Mall, which doesn't exist anymore. But Steve kept the con going. So it's just a connection kind of thing.
Yeah, that's where I met Steve too at the War Games store in the mall here.
Mm-hmm.
I miss that store. You're also a bit of a artist.
Yeah, yeah. I have been drawing longer than I've been writing. Uh, right now, I've been learning to do digital, which has its own things. Because, like I said, I'm working on a comic, so I gotta learn the digital and all the ins and outs of that. I've been doing traditional for a long time, mostly just pencils, and then I just started doing markers. And I actually, that one right there is an example. That is a Goonimon from the Digimon series. But yeah, I've been pushing a bit more on that lately so I can have a bigger display at my table because I draw the characters that are in my books, but there are a couple that I still haven't drawn. So I'd like to get back and finish that out. So that way I can be like, here's this character and here's that character. So people can be like, oh, that looks cool.
Did you do the covers for your books?
I did not. Those were done through somebody on the design team through the publisher. But I think they turned out really good. So,
Yeah, yeah, they're cool. Um, I'm looking at the cover for one of the books right now, The Uncovering. And
mm-hmm.
actually, do you want to explain what we're looking at here with this one? Because it looks like some spaceships shooting at like a giant skull planet thing.
So no, it's a dragon. So the dragon is just kind of like
Oh,
a,
okay,
a, a shadowy figure to sort of represent that there's dragons in the story, and then you got the ships there,
okay,
and then if you look at the bottom, you can see like glowing lights near the bottom.
yeah,
That kind of represents them finding the necklaces because there's the I believe there are 8 glowing lights at the bottom. I think it's 8, but yeah, that's supposed to kind of be like, oh, that's what they're finding.
okay. Is the is that picture to scale with the size of the dragon compared to the
No,
spaceships?
no, no.
Oh, okay,
Uh,
because that's a large dragon.
there are big dragons, but I wouldn't say they're that big to those ships.
Okay, can you, can you tell us a little bit more about your dragons? Like, are they fire breathers, or do they have like magical powers?
So there's a large variety, and the there's fire breather, there's poison spitters, there's ice breathers, there's really large ones, really small ones. Um, some of them don't actually have wings because they like maneuver faster. Uh, Most of what I put in there was kind of like I tried to pull more from elements. So you get, like I said, the fire, the ice. There's the wind. There's some water ones in there too. But the dragons themselves dragons have always been something that I've really liked in terms of fantasy, and to have somebody have command over them, which is my character, is something that I always thought would be cool if I just had a dragon be like, yeah, let's go fly or fight or that kind of thing.
Now, speaking of dragons and fantasy, what are some of your influences that you have?
Well, for the dragons, would be Christopher Paolini for the Aragon series, which I don't know if I'll be able to meet him because I'm gonna be a special guest at the Grand Rapids Comic Con coming up November 15th. Christopher
Oh,
Paolini
cool.
is going to be there, and he's only going to be there Sunday, but I'm not supposed to leave my table as a special guest. So I might have to maneuver around some way to actually meet him because his Aragon books were a big influence for dragons. The earliest thing that uh, had my interest for dragons was a movie called Flight of Dragons. And I believe it was like mid 80s that movie came out. And it was an animated film. And I believe it was actually based on a book. I don't know if the book is a different name or anything like that, but it had like John Ritter, it had James Earl Jones as voice actors in that movie, and it was really cool to me how in the film the guy gets pulled from like our world to the magical world. So he's always made stories and games that involve dragons and magic. So he was really surprised and amazed by all the stuff that he was seeing. It was to me, it was a really good film. So, but some other influences, Digimon was a big influence, and if if you get into the Digimon community nowadays, a lot of people say that they hate season 4, but that was my favorite season because that's the one where the kids could become the Digimon, and that's kind of I'm pretty sure that's what influenced me to have the kids in my books turn into the Warriors. So I can guarantee that was like a huge influence for me on that.
Do you get inspired like when you're writing? Do you get inspired by like listening to music at all, or is that not really your
Oh,
thing?
oh, absolutely. To me, some of the best music to listen to is mostly instrumental, and Thomas Bergerson. Some of his music will be under the name Two Steps from Hell, and he's got all these fantastical, just like otherworldly kind of music, and it's like I can take those and picture a scene that goes with it. And just the two that I have that I've always gone back to were called one was called Promise and the other one was called Remember Me. And they just have like, the full I can like hear the story in it where it has like the rise and it's got all this activity going on, then it hits the climax and then it comes down to the conclusion. And then another music that I listen to is Lindsey Sterling because a lot of her earlier stuff was instrumental. Her newer albums have vocals in it from other artists, but her earlier stuff with instrumentals, I was really hooked on those, and that had a lot of influence for my writing as well.
Okay. Now, are you much of a gamer?
Oh yeah, I am sitting here in front of my gaming PC with a screen there and a screen there and a big tower right there. World of Warcraft is probably the game that I've played the most. So that had a lot of influence on me too, because there were dragons in there and a lot of fantasy races. And then as the story moved on, you found that there were other planets out there too, and just like the designs that come from that, mostly the armor. Oh my gosh, the armor that they designed for those games are insane.
Is that all you play usually? Is MMOs, or do you like other
Uh,
stuff too?
that's the only MMO I play because I know if I get
Okay.
into another one, I'll have absolutely no life at all. Um, my PC is mostly, like I said, World of Warcraft. I have some games on Steam, like shooters like Borderlands and stuff like that. I am a Nintendo guy, so I got all the Mario, the Metroid, the Zelda, all that kind of all the all the basic Nintendo kind of stuff, and then I get some that are just random pulls here and there. But yeah, those games are really uh, just a really great way to pass the time and pick up more just ideas and get the brain thinking about uh, so a game that my favorite game, which I know is another influence that I had, was Secret of Mana, which was on the Super Nintendo. You played that one?
I have, yes.
You have played
Very good
Secret of
game.
Mana. So that one is another thing where I can like kind of look at how it must have been like a subconscious thing when I was writing, because there's a place in the book, it's Element. There's a planet called Element, which takes very similar uh, representation from, I believe it was called the North Country. I think it was North Country in Secret of Mana. And then there were 8 warriors. There's 8 warriors in the books, and the characters in Secret of Mana get 8 weapons, and the weapons are almost one for one.
That's
Because
awesome.
there's let's see if I can remember all the weapons that are in the game, because the game was obviously a sword, a whip, a spear, a javelin, a boomerang, a bow and arrow, knuckles, and an axe.
Yep.
So let's see. So what did I swap out? I have the sword, I have a spear, I have the knuckles, I have an axe, I have a whip, I have a scythe. So I think the scythe is the only thing that switched something out. I'm trying to remember. Uh, I do have a bow and arrow, and I do have what would essentially be a boomerang. So the javelin. So the javelin got
Okay.
swapped for a scythe.
Yeah, that was definitely a fun game. It's been a while since I played it, but and I remember playing that as a kid with one of my friends because one of the cool things about that is it has multiplayer.
Yeah.
So that was
Yep.
good times.
Yeah. And I kept wondering, because I didn't know this growing up. There was an adapter for the Super Nintendo, so you could end up having 4 player. I didn't know that. So you could play
Who
all
was the?
three of the characters in Secret of Mana, but there were very few games where you could have 4 player. I think Mario Kart might have been one of them. But if you look it up, you can find an adapter that makes it so you can have 4 player on some Super Nintendo games.
Yeah, I think another one was there was a Lord of the Rings game too on the Super Nintendo. Um, I think you could have the adapter on that. But yes, the Super Nintendo was a great system. It had so many good RPGs on it.
Oh
Uh,
yeah,
if
had a
you,
ton of RPGs. We never beat it, but we had Seventh Saga. I remember that being a very challenging game, and I didn't find out until years later that's because that RPG was designed for the enemies to level up as you leveled up. You weren't able to like power level and get super strong. you would level up, which would kind of be like, you're leveling up and the enemy is kind of like leveling up with you. So yeah, as a kid, that game was really hard.
Do you ever play Earthbound?
I did not actually. Um, that's there's many games on my list of I want to play that game, but it's another I need time. I'm working on art and I'm working on a comic. I'm working on other books. It's a little hard to get to other games.
Yep, yep, definitely understand that. Uh, Evan, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about one of your other talents that you have. At When we were at ThunderCon, you put on quite the karaoke performance there. Is that something you practice?
So that kind of became a tradition. Um, One of the years that the con was going on at the mall, they had just a stage area for people to come up and do their cosplay and kind of walk down, and it was another thing for Dan Phillips to do his makeup demonstration. So they had a microphone and speakers, and there was a couple different things that they had for contests, but uh, it was a year where I think it was like within like the last 2 hours of the show that the crowd kind of died down, and somebody made the comment of just doing karaoke to pass the time. Well, I'm not a singer myself, but I was a Swiftie back then. I haven't like listened to Taylor Swift's new stuff in years, but I got up on stage and I was just lip sync through which one was it? Because I did a couple. I know one of them was Trouble, and the other one was the We're Never Getting Back Together, which I still do the We're Never Getting Back Together one. I haven't done Trouble in a while, but every year now that's just something I do, and everybody seems to love it. So
Yeah, that was. I applaud you for that performance. That was pretty good. uh, Evan, let me just jump back to the Warriors Legacy real quick here.
hmm
Now, what what is it that you're hoping to accomplish with these books? Like, are you just writing them for yourself, or
I would like to be a full time author because, like I said, I have spinoffs that I've got planned. I've got a couple other books that I started. The Warriors Legacy is definitely it's my baby, and it to me it's a great starting point. I see them as great books on my side. I've had many people tell me they like them. They want to see they want to see more of my writing. But everybody's first is never, to me, I would say is never their best. So these books I mostly wrote for myself and to be able to go to Comic Cons and other events to have other people experience the fun that I put into these stories is a really, really great just accomplishment for me. So I'm hoping that with these books, it will lead to even greater books along the way for other people to enjoy or to inspire others to write too, because you got to start somewhere. There was somebody, I haven't seen him in a while. There was one of the first years I did ThunderCon. There was, I want to say he was probably like a 10 or 11 at the time. His name was Hunter, and he would come back year after year to see me because my books were his favorite books. So that was really cool. I don't know if he's still around Alpina or anything. I haven't seen him in probably maybe 4 or 5 years. I'm not 100% on that, but yeah, just the the books themselves. If I can make that impact on one kid, at the time, I don't know how old he would be now, but I'm hoping that my books can make more impact on other people.
That's awesome. And you kind of touched on the next question I had for you a little bit, and that is, what kind of advice would you have for aspiring writers?
Do it. There's so many people. I over the 15 years, so many conversations will start out with, "Did you write these books?" "Yeah, I wrote these books." "Man, I wish I could write," or "I've wanted to write a book." And it's like, well, what's stopping you? When I first started writing these, it was pad and paper. There wasn't a computer that you could type it in and, delete or backspace or edit in that way. It was, you have what you have and you just kind of go with it. Um, I will have, being at the Grand Rapids Con, there will be two panels. I will be hosting two panels, and one of them will be things I wish I knew, and then the other one will be about writer's block. So hopefully, people that see this podcast will come to the Grand Rapids and hear those, because I'll have a lot of more advice and suggestions there. But um, the biggest advice that I can give is take notes. Have a pencil and paper nearby wherever you are, because if you have an idea, if you don't write it down, I can almost guarantee you're gonna just forget it. It's gonna be gone.
Yeah, that's very good advice, and um, I like to write, and that's something I'm trying to get in the habit of doing is taking more notes because, like you said, if you don't write it down, it's going to eventually fade from your mind, and then be gone into the void forever. Unfortunately.
Right, exactly.
All right, Evan, do you have a website you'd like to share?
I'm mostly just on socials. My publisher website, which is bhcpress.com, you can find me specifically on there, and that has links to my books where you can get it through them or through Amazon or Google Play or Kindle. But for me, if you just search my name on Facebook or Instagram, um, I do have a Twitter. I don't really use it. I just never have. I don't know.
Uh, by the way, the Grand Rapids Comic Con. What are the dates for that?
That is the fifth. Let me just open the calendar to double check. I'm pretty sure it's 15, 16, 17. Yep, 15, 16, 17 of November. So that's Friday through Saturday. Friday through
Oh, okay,
Sunday.
that's coming up pretty quick then.
Yes, yes, it is.
Okay,
And
awesome.
I feel like I'm not prepared, even though I've been prepared. I've been doing Comic Cons for 15 years. It's just this will be the biggest one for me, because this will be the first time that I'm actually a guest at a show as opposed to being in the artist alley.
Okay, gotcha. So do you normally like get a little bit of the jitters at cons, or just because this is a bigger one for you?
Just because this is a bigger one for me, I really don't get nervous for like interactions or being in an artist alley and anything like that. There are some times where it's things might get awkward just because of my neighbors. You'll get placed next to somebody you don't know, and they might interact weird, or but that doesn't happen that often. I mean, that's like maybe 1 in 100. Anybody that has done Artist Alley or just gone to Comic Cons, they'll pretty much tell you that their experience is good.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Evan, I'll throw some links in the description for this episode so people can find you, and I'll link to your books as well. And I'd just like to
Awesome.
say thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, Evan Hooker, again, thanks so much, and thanks to everyone for joining us. If you'd like to learn more about my podcast, you can find me on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. Just search for Happy Moment Podcast, and I will talk to you guys next time. Take care, everybody.